Thanks for joining us and listening to another God-lived and God-breathed message by Darius Nelms. Our mission is to increase our generation standard back to God's standard of excellence and kingdom living through personal development, relational wisdom, business management, and faith increase. Our aim is that this message inspires and infuses you to reach your next level of living and helps you discover your rightful place in God's kingdom. Now, let's dive into the message.
Welcome to another episode and another week of getting through my latest book entitled Why Me? 5 Strategies for How Good People Can Overcome Bad Situations. We're going to get through strategy 1 today, which is mindset in the face of misfortune. That's mindset in the face of misfortune. And we're just going to kind of just slow jog through some questions and just kind of dive into some of the writing points a little deeper, just to provide clarity for some. If you're following along with the book, the book is available on my website, which will be in the description box below. We have a digital PDF version, physical copy, and we have a narrated audio book as well. So whichever is your pick or your poison, you can get those below in the description box. So for chapter 1, mindset in the face of misfortune, one of the questions that we have to ask is, if you consider yourself good, what does it mean to see yourself in Job, right? If you consider yourself good, what does it mean to see yourself in Job? And so Job, of course, is a book in the Bible. It's a man, more particularly. And Job was considered a good person. He was a good person. He was a righteous man according to God's standard, yet he still suffered great misfortune. He suffered misfortune in a way to where if you read the book and you are not a believer of God, you know nothing about Christ, and you would say that God is cruel and there's no reason why Job should not have gone through that. Although that could be a foreshadow of Jesus being a righteous and a flawless man, yet he still died. He still experienced negativity. He still experienced the bad responses of people. He still experienced the negative energy of people. He still created enemies, although he never went looking for enemies. So we can kind of get into this whole rabbit hole of goodness. We kind of talked about it a little bit last week, but even with our flaws and our sinful nature, we're still chosen by God. But again, if you see yourself as a good person, supposedly, you can't think that you are exempt from bad situation or misfortunate situations. It happens. It is part of the process. It's part of the plan of God. But the thing is, as I write about in chapter 1, sometimes greater comes later. So relative to the misfortune and the things that we experience in this life that may be unfavorable to us, and we may feel like it's not warranted for God to approve for this to be happening to us. Keep in mind, Job experienced and felt the same exact thing. But we realize, even when we get to the end of Job, relative to our hope and our faith, that he got double for his trouble, as they would say. And so as it pertains to us going through things and us thinking that we are a good person or we have some righteous standard, we have to see ourselves in Job and recognizing that we are going to go through things in this life, things that we don't prefer, things that, we don't want to, things that we don't like. However, greater sometimes comes later. And as long as you stick to it and you are doing everything that you can to get to the other side, of that situation, to get to the other side of that misfortune, to not let that misfortune define you, to not get stuck in a rut with that misfortune, but literally actively choosing to act and do it with striking speed, as you read on the back of the cover of the book. You will recognize that there's a greater response that God is going to have toward you, but you have to endure to the end. The second question could be asked as you read the book and as you read chapter 1, mindset in the face of misfortune, is how should we view being attacked? How should we view being attacked? First and foremost, I think that we should view being attacked as we're worth attacking. We're worth attacking. That's not vain or egotistical or to put yourself on some high pedestal and think that you are this almighty God or something like that. No, I'm just talking about mindset. You have to realize that you are worth attacking. Your enemy thinks about you a certain way, and it's a positive and it's a negative to that. But right now I'm going to talk about the positive. Your enemy thinks something of you so much, even if it's to try to prove something wrong about you, that you are worth the time, the energy, and the effort to attack. You're worth that much that they are willing to waste time, that they are willing to waste resources, that they are willing to waste energy to attack you. This is socially and this is spiritually. They work in tandem. They're tangoing here, right? Spiritual and socially, right? And we know even with socially, that's relationally, just with other people in the world. It's the realm of the social sphere. And so we have to view being attacked as being a worthy opponent, right? Being a worthy opponent. Because you have something worth attacking. You know, if you were nothing and, you know, you weren't about anything, then the attack wouldn't, you know, it wouldn't make sense. But it's because you possess something. You have something that an enemy is after, and they will do everything they can to try to sabotage you. And I'm ministering to myself as I said this. They will do anything in their power to try to stop your forward progress. And essentially that's what an enemy is. And I'll talk about that a little later in the book. But an enemy is anybody or any entity that tries to stop your forward progress and your forward movement and progression. So that's how we should view being attacked. Third question. What was the first ever attack on humanity? As you read in the book, the first ever attack on humanity was the mind, was the hijacking of the mind. That was the first ever attack on the ground. God created man. God created woman out of man. Then from there, that's when the plan was hatched by an enemy, a foreign entity other than God, to try to hijack the mind, So that was the first ever attack for the mind. And as I write about in the book and as you'll read, anytime something goes against God's order, you already know that it's an attack on the mind. Anything that contradicts God's direction, you already know it's an attack on the mind. And so anything that is going against the way that God wants things to be according to his will, best believe it's an attack on the mind. Another question is, how is social media the modern tree of knowledge? How is social media the modern tree of knowledge? I've been sharing with people, various people, that even social media at its conception, you can say it was manageable, okay? But now where we are in 2025, 2026, going into 2027, social media is unregulated and it is out of control. There's almost nothing that you can't put on social media. You can put almost anything on social media, whether it's true or not, whether it's fake or real. You can put it on social media. And the Bible in Ecclesiastes talks about the more knowledge, the more grief. And I write about that in the book. Because the more that you ingest, the harder it will be to digest, and you'll be sick, period. You'll be sick. So when it comes to social media, the more that we ingest social media, which usually promote the things that are not like God, once we start to ingest that stuff, from ingestion goes to digestion. And once we begin to digest it, we become spiritually sick. We become socially sick. We become physically sick. That's why there's a generation that's after me, the younger generation now, why they are struggling so much with anxiety and depression, and the suicide rate is extremely high, and there's so much war in school behind kids bringing cell phones to school and social media and cyberbullying, online bullying, and things of that nature, because you're ingesting the things on social media. You're ingesting what other people's lives are. You are being exposed to information that you were probably never meant to know just for your sanity. You know, you are seeing murders happen on video that you were never meant to see. You're ingesting that. And not only are you ingesting it, because ingestion starts here, but then it gets down into the intestinal tract. That's when you begin digesting, and then it makes you sick. It makes you sick in your mind. Because it corrupts your mind. It taints your mind. It changes your expectations, right? I say this a lot today about the women. I'm in my generation. I've had this conversation with various people, especially single men, about the dating scene and how a lot of the women, on social media, they, that paints a false expectation about what relationships are supposed to be, about what lifestyle is supposed to be, about what material aspirations and desires are supposed to be, because you're constantly ingesting to digest that, and it's making you sick. You're doing things that you're not called to do to try to achieve things that you were never called to achieve, all because of social media, the forbidden tree of knowledge. Is hijacking the mind. The next question. Explain the concept of training your mind in times of peace. Explain the concept of training your mind in times of peace. It's in times of peace when you want to do your training. When things are calm, when the waters are calm, that's the time to train. You don't want to wait until something happens and then you panic. I write about that in the book. I say it's the training of the mind in times of peace, so that when storms come, if you hadn't trained your mind, your first response is to panic. Because training in times of peace and when things are comfortable will allow you to build your spiritual house for when the storm comes and when the storm hits. In the book of Matthew, it talks about how there are two houses that are built, one on sinking sand. We're talking about foundational things. And when the storm hit and it hit the house, it flushed away, right? And so we have to understand that the spiritual house that we're building up, it is not just for the good times, and it's not just for faith and belief for what we can get from God, but our spiritual house is being built up for when hard times come, for when adversity comes, that we can have hope to grab a hold to. Because many times, many people feel like life is not worth living anymore. Things have gotten so rough that life doesn't feel like living anymore. Life doesn't feel like living anymore. You feel like you can't get anything right. Life seems to not be working in your favor. Sometimes you may feel as though life would move on and be better without you being here, right? But it's the training of the mind in times of peace. And I'm not saying that you won't still have those thoughts, but it's a matter of continuing and choosing to overcome those thoughts. It's choosing to overcome those thoughts. That's the training of the mind in times of peace. So that when things happen in life, you aren't caught by surprise in terms of how you respond. You might be caught by surprise initially, like, oh, like this is war, this is battle, sure. But once you get in the heat of battle, your instincts, your spiritual instincts should start to kick in. If you're in the heat of battle, relative to a macro level view as a general, looking at the terrain, the domain, the landscape, if your reaction and your response is not spiritual, and you are unable to put on your spiritual lenses and really just see what's going on the landscape, then you're missing a great portion of how to actually win the war. Not just the battle, but the war. And so the training of your mind during peaceful times is building up your spiritual house, so that way you can have the spiritual knowledge that you need to be able to look at the landscape from a macro level view when the times get tough. That doesn't mean that just because you view it, it's going to get easier today, even though some of us may want it to. Like, for instance, I'm like that. If there's a problem, I want to fix it right now. I want to fix it right now. especially something major. I don't want it to continue to go on and on and on. I think that with sound counsel and with proper instruction from the Lord, when we understand how He operates, it's like, man, I gotta shake back. I gotta get back. I can't let this linger too long. I have to point out my activity, and I have to strike with speed to get it back on track, to get it right back. I told somebody one time that change can be immediate if you want it to be. Change can be immediate if you want it to be. Change does not have to necessarily be long and drawn out and it take months and years and all this other stuff. Like, change can be immediate if you want it to be. It's just about the time, the effort, and the energy that you want to put into being self-aware and knowing what it is that you need to be alerted about, and trusting that God is going to start a work in you right now to help you change what you need to change. Last question. What should you do when you figure out during social and spiritual warfare that you've been fighting on the wrong battlefield? What should you do when you figure out during social and spiritual warfare that you've been fighting on the wrong battlefield? I write about in the book, using Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as an example, that he admitted that he was fighting on the wrong battlefield when he told Harry Belafonte that he believes that he's integrated his people into a burning house. In other words, Dr. Martin Luther King had a realization toward the end of his life that painted the picture that maybe some of the things that he did not get the result that he had hoped for. And it's not to say that his efforts weren't vain or what he didn't work for what it's worth, because it did, and we honor and we cherish and we thank God for Dr. King because he led the civil rights movement. You know, he helped lead Black people out of oppression, physical oppression at least. And so we're very grateful for Dr. King, and I admire him because he was able to see the landscape of what he was experiencing, and he recognized that he was fighting on the wrong battlefield. And it was from there when he began to try to correct where he went wrong, or where he felt like he went wrong. I'm not even going to say he went wrong because I don't necessarily agree with that. But from where he felt like he went wrong, and he did exactly like is on the back of this book where it says Activity, Activity, Speed by Napoleon Bonaparte. Dr. Martin Luther King hatched out a new plan, and he began striking with speed. He began talking about the things that he felt that he should have been talking about. And he began doing that quickly. Everywhere he went, he changed his message. He changed his tune. He began doing it really, really quick. He began striking with speed. And so when we figure out that we are fighting on the wrong battlefield, socially and spiritually, the first thing that we ought to do, as I write about in the book, is we have to be like Dr. King. And we have to admit that we're, for one, fighting on the wrong battlefield. And secondly, then we have to hatch out a new plan and begin striking with speed. Not wasting time, but striking with speed. That's what happens when you realize you're fighting on the wrong battlefield. You withdraw the troops. Come back. We've been fighting on the wrong battlefield. And then when you figure out where to go and where to fight, you send the troops out and you tell them, go pick them apart. Go get them. Because you got to get back on the right playing field, on the right battlefield. Thank you so much for walking with me through chapter 1 of my latest book entitled, Why Me? Mindset in the Face of Misfortune. Until next time, friends. Peace.
May the Lord bless you, keep you, and make His face shine upon you. As we abide in His grace, presence, and peace, remember that you are an agent of change wherever your feet shall tread. Thanks for listening to this message and for the opportunity to teach and lead you. Until next time.